Hey guys, it's Em. Before this video properly starts, I gotta make you aware of 3 things. First, this video was recorded all the way back before my Space Marines 2 video, meaning you're gonna be hearing my old mic for a majority of it, except for a few cut-in fixes and then some segments at the end I wanted to add on. Second, I feel like this review encapsulates a lot of my frustrations with the game in a very raw way. The tone's a bit more aggressive than I usually go for, and I imagine if I wrote this recently, I would have tackled it differently, but my overall thoughts wouldn't change that much. So expect some annotations here and there. Third, and finally, I wasn't fully aware of how much the remake changed from the original. So when I bring up certain designs or the music, be aware that I'm fully talking about the remake and not the base PS3 game. With all that cleared up, let me slide it back to 2024 M. Now, finally, I can say that I've played every Souls game. I finally got my grubby little hands on Demon Souls, and I feel there's a lot to talk about with this game. To the point I kinda just want to jump into it. But just to address something, like I did in my Dark Souls 1 video, I'll give this game its for the time merits and acknowledge it's the first game in this style they made, but that's not gonna protect it from all the criticisms I have about it, as we now have multiple games of this style to compare it to. And I feel like pretending something is absolutely flawless by today's standards because it did something important a long time ago is kind of goofy. Anyways, let's get into the actual review. The world is interesting here, mainly from today's lens where we've got multiple other FromSoft Souls games. It's very large in scale and surprisingly, it feels pretty different to the other Souls worlds, which caught me off guard because I really expected it to just look like Dark Souls 0.5 to be honest, with the remake specifically looking downright gorgeous at times. But I can't help but feel some of the area designs are rather basic concepts with nothing much extra to help them be memorable. Again, they look great visually, but there isn't much to make you go, ah, this is that unique FromSoft Demon Souls spin on it. The swamps visually look like generic dark fantasy swamps. The area above the Prison of Hope looks like an AI rendering of Gothic Castle. The mines look like, well, generic mines, and I could probably go on and on. This isn't a ginormous issue or anything like that, but it's something I feel is fairly noticeable coming back to this game after playing the others. Now let's talk about something other than design. Let's talk about area traversal. These two things seem pretty close, but I want to give them their own sections. In DS1, the traversal was good for the first half. Most think DS2's areas are too big, and the main complaint with 3 is that they're too linear. Demon Souls, I'd say, is very close to Dark Souls 3 in that regard. Most of the time, you can just walk in a straight line, and you'll be making progress to the next area. This isn't me saying it doesn't have things to find around its nooks and crannies, like NPCs or maybe hidden weapons, but it feels you have to go out of your way to find most of those things, instead of how it is in most first Souls game playthroughs, where you're so lost you happen to stumble into them. As for the area's difficulties, it ranges from a nice summer's day to fucking god-awful. Most of this game I'd say is inoffensive. Enemies in front of you, you deal with them, and that's it. Standard FromSoft fare. It's when they decide to get quirky we had problems. The Prison of Hope is on God one of the worst fucking areas I've ever had to play through. You have to run up and down floors looking for keys, then you have to look for doors to eventually get out. It doesn't sound that bad when I explain it, but on my first playthrough I legitimately spent hours in this place trying to figure out what the fuck I was doing. What makes it worse is unlike Blighttown or the Black Gulch, where you figure out where you can jump down to save time and it looks cool, you have to boringly scuttle through these samey looking hallways every single playthrough you do of this game. And of the 3 times I beat it, I can tell you it never gets fun replaying this area. The swamp here is one of the most irritating areas ever made. It's like the Abyss Watcher swamp in DS3, but dialed up to the point where it's an entire Arkstone. You have to go through 2 segments of the map that are just you slowly walking through slop until you find the boss. And just so you know, weapon arts aren't a thing yet, so there's no funny quick step exploit to get past this. You just have to trot through slop for 15 or so minutes. The Flame Lurker runback is one of the worst ideas I've ever heard of. You have to drop multiple times and take health damage with every fall before you fight the boss, meaning you're missing a clump of your healing supplies before you even get to the bottom. I guarantee you in any future games, they would have put a bonfire at the bottom of this, but you have to do this every single time. Moving off of that area in particular, the Storm King's Arcstone has these immaculate enemies that I call the Storm Rays.
Enemies will get their own segment, but I feel I need to talk about these guys here, as they slot more into area hazards than enemies for me.
The area design itself I wouldn't say is bad, but then they sprinkle in these dickheads damn near every outside section, and they will pelt you with pretty high damage projectiles. You can't even really kill them until you've beaten the area. This makes exploring this section extremely irritating because you'll be fighting something or looking around, then you'll randomly get pelted off screen for a minimum a quarter of your health or more. I just want to reiterate, there's a good clump of areas I have no problem with here. Boletaria, the mines, the intersection of the Storm King's area, but it's just the main ones you heard me complain about stick out like a sore thumb. They're the sections you'll groan about when thinking of replaying this game. You may be wondering, hey Em, that's cute and all, but I bet some of these areas are optional. This game doesn't fucking have optional areas! You know with some of DS2's most complained about areas, like Frigid Outskirts or Blue Smelter, they're at least optional? You have to play these segments every time you play the game. Still in a way on the areas, and a point that will help me tie into the bosses in this game, boss runbacks here are god awful. I don't often die to the bosses here for reasons we'll get into, but if you do, holy fuck. Normally this is where I'd sprinkle in specific examples of bad runbacks, but honestly, it'd be easier to say the only exceptions. Most of the final Arcstone bosses are spared awful runbacks as there's a spawn point right outside of their areas. Dragon God, Storm King, and not Velstadt were spared of this fate. Phalanx, once you unlock the shortcut, is just a skip away. And that's kinda it. Everyone else, if you die fighting them, you might as well be re-exploring the entire area again, as quite a few of the runbacks here take 3 to 5 minutes or so just to get back to. This game has by far the worst runbacks for me. In other DS games, we might have 1 or 2 bad examples, but here, it's 70% of them. Bosses here without a doubt are the worst in this series. It's not even a close competition for me. Now when I say worst, I'm not saying it in the normal YouTuber way of saying it's the worst thing I've ever played in my life, but by comparison to every other Souls game they've made, these are the weakest. We already know how Dark Souls 1 and 2 bosses can't turn around. This game has the most intense variant of that problem. Some bosses I was able to kill while they were struggling to turn.
Unless you're standing perfectly still in front of them, it feels like they can hardly do anything to you.
But unfortunately, even if they could turn, it wouldn't mean much. Many of them only have 3 or 4 moves that are extremely telegraphed and easy to dodge. If you've played any other Souls game, you'd probably crush this game's bosses in a matter of seconds. All these things combined led to the standard attack and roll type boss fights in this game feeling like fodder. You may think the standard mechanics of this game's bosses should cover everything I'd have to say about them, but they're so inherently flawed, I'm not done yet. The naming team did not earn their cut in this game at all. So many of the bosses sound like throwaway D&D bosses. The Dirty Colossus and Tower Knight immediately come to mind. Many things here are just titles without any cool sort of name to bring it all the way around. If Champion Gundyr was in this game, they'd probably just name him Champion and call it a day. The worst example of this game's relatively simple naming scheme is that what's widely considered the best boss in this game by its fans was named the Penetrator. Maybe this sounded cool in the devs' heads or something, but it sounds odd saying, yeah guys, my favorite character's name is the Penetrator. It sounds like you're describing an afternoon toy more than anything. But enough about that. Let's talk about the gimmick bosses. The bosses that have some unique thing that separates them from the norm. They all kinda fucking suck. Dragon God is one of the coolest designs in the entire game. They even hype him up if you can beat the first tutorial boss. But when you reach him, you get stuck in a god-awful stealth section where all you need to do is hit him with 2 Dragonators in his arms and then smack his jaw, which somehow kills him. Storm King was a boss I was actually excited for. I knew the Storm Ruler initially was in this game, so I was really ready to see it in action against something different than yours. Then you get to the boss fight and it's you getting pelted off screen by manta rays while trying to do one extremely slow slash that takes your entire stamina bar. Visually, again, amazing area, but that's really the only thing this fight has. Maneater was one boss I had loosely heard of before. Didn't know his design or what his fight was, but I had heard about his mostly annoying reputation. When I got to the fight, like all the others, again, very few moves, and takes a lot of damage. The issue is him flying. The boss arena is this skinny ass platform with a wide middle section. Whenever this boss jankily and inevitably falls off the side due to this headbutt move where he flings himself forward, he begins flying. At this time, you normally cannot hit him, and you're forced to just stare at him. If this wasn't enough, if you don't beat him fast enough, a second man-eater spawns, exacerbating these already unpleasant issues. So in summary, you end up with a boss fight on a mostly tight platform that may shove you off the side and force a 3 or so minute run back. A boss that will force you to just stare at him and twiddle your thumbs multiple times, and a boss that could possibly lead to a gank that doubles these issues. 3 more big encounters of note, and I'll promise I'll end this section. Flame Lurker. Flame Lurker is probably one of the hardest bosses in this game, but not in a good way. First of all, he's extremely resistant to a good chunk of weapons. Weapons that you'll most likely have been using up to this point, meaning you'll basically be hitting him for way longer than most of the others. Second is his jump move. Many bosses in this game do a move, miss or get dodged, then you hit them. Standard Souls fare, of course. But Flame Lurker here has a move where he can cancel out of stun and jump away or to the side of you. This wouldn't be annoying if it didn't do damage. This leads to you having to get 2 hits in, wait for him to unstun himself to hop, then hit him again. It might sound relatively small, but if you've played this game, you might feel why it drives me up the wall. It's not hard, but once you learn it, it's not even a cool opening. It's just annoying to be annoying. Old Hero is a boss with a design I really like. The tribal warrior with the big ass flame sword. But like Leechmonger and Adjudicator, 2 other bosses I love visually, I should have known he was gonna let me down. And he did. The Old Hero has a mechanic where, well, he's blind, meaning that if you walk around and take the fight slow, he can't accurately tell where you are. This would be cool in Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring, where the bosses didn't fight like they were underwater in quicksand, but the poor fuck can barely hit you if you go towards his legs. The mechanic's nigh useless because of how incredibly easy he already is. The only move he has to hit you if you're close is this explosion move with like 3 seconds of over-telegraphed windup. So what I was left with is a cool design with seemingly no lore, a forgettable OST, and a brutal run back if you manage to die. Finally, let's talk about our last main boss, King Alon. Now in any other game, I'm sure Big Al here would be okay, but here he feels like kind of a broken mess. It seems like he has the opposite problem of literally every other boss in this game. Instead of overly telegraphing, he just doesn't. He has some moves where I swear they just start and you have barely any time to react to them. And considering the fact he's the final boss and does final boss levels of damage, this can be kind of annoying. It's low-key the same issue I had with Dark Souls 1 Gwyn. It's really weird to approach Al because there's a chance he'll immediately swing and just take a chunk of your health bar off. The enemies here are either trivial or extremely problematic with no in-between, to the point where I don't have a lot to say about a chunk of them, but the ones I do have things to say about, I have a visceral hate for them. Let's start with the Red Knights, one of the literal worst enemies I feel they've ever made. They do a shitload of damage, more so than anyone else in the game. It's very possible they'll hit you once and immediately kill you. The worst instance of these guys is the area in front of the Penetrators room. These variants have spears, a weapon type I already don't like fighting against if you remember my knife-only video.
Has anyone ever liked any spear weapon in the history of any of these damn games? And ever.
But the main issue here is they have this one charge move. This move will take chunks of your health bar, and for some ungodly reason it has no end lag at all. You know, one of the things that keep the core of this game together. It doesn't make any sense to me that even if this is the first Souls game, you'd make a move that does a ton of damage and has no end lag. It's an extremely poor design choice, and there's 3 of them together that will all do this move at the same time. It's one of the main reasons I flat out ignore these guys unless I have to fight them. Which, by the way, you have to fight one before you reach King Al. Every single retry. It's agonizing. The flying manta rays we already went over, so I won't harp on them again, but everything I said before still stands. These basic little swamp grunt guys have a charging attack that can hit you multiple times. In summary, it's a stun lock multi-hitting attack that comes out nigh instantly that multiple of them can do. In base game, it really hurts but won't often instantly kill you, so it may line you up for another charge or another enemy that's winding up something. which is pretty ass. But once you're on New Game, it's an insta-kill jump scare whenever it happens. You'll be having a good run, then you'll get hit with this move once and be forced to do the entire run back again. It's one of the worst moves I feel FromSoft ever made due to how randomly strong it gets. Most of the other enemies in this game I don't really think are that bad on their own. But like the Stingrays, sometimes they just have absolute asshole placement. If you die fighting the Fire Monk, for example, you have to fight this Cthulhu looking thing on a very slim stairway that forces you to roll forwards or backwards, or else you'll immediately die. When you're doing the old heroes run back, there's two ghosts with super long ranged laser attacks that are positioned perfectly to block you, so you have to fight them every time. It's not a trap to insta-kill you if you skip something, or even a hard encounter on its own. It's something I feel they put there just to be dicks. Overall, the enemies here aren't on average awful, but when they get annoying, it's almost enough to make you want to break your damn controller. Builds in this game, frankly, are the worst of any main Souls game. By a good margin, I'd say. In Dark Souls 1, you didn't have a ton of options for each build, but they all felt strong, so they were fine. Dark Souls 2 had the most variety in the series, and Dark Souls 3 was the worst in my opinion, because besides some cool looking melee weapons that didn't even outperform most of the normal weapons, everything else here was very mediocre. But in this game, it doesn't even have the Dark Souls 3, but at least the moves look cool excuse, right? Let's start with magic. Magic is extremely basic in this game. Most of it boils down to you shoot a small projectile. And while in the remake the effects on them are pretty, for the most part they're really boring. The most interesting looking attack abilities are probably Homing Soul Mass and Firestorm, which I feel should say a lot about the situation this game's in if you know what those abilities look like. Efficiency wise on average, they're also fine. Though excluding Firestorm in specific circumstances, I'd say again like Dark Souls 3, your melee would probably do more. Now the support abilities look great, but they're support abilities that have insanely long windup and often aren't even worth doing. If you've played this game, you know how overall limiting magic is in this regard. Soul Dart's cool for the first hour or so of the game, but once you get over it, you notice it's on average the best damage spell, and all you do is shoot a little blast out of your hand. I tried to enjoy a lot of the other options here, but they're just so dull. Then let's talk about the boss weapons, because there's a big difference between these and literally every other Souls game. As I'm sure you're aware, in other Souls games, boss weapons often have unique movesets or properties to help them stand out from the normal weapons. Think of things like the Looking Glass Knight's sword shooting electricity, Gaping Dragon's tail cut, weapon I forgot the name of having that unique ground slam, or the Abyss Watcher's swords letting you slide across the ground. This game doesn't have anything like that. The boss weapons here most of the time give you a small stat effect and that's it, which is so lame I didn't even really bother using them once I had unlocked them. What doesn't help that point is many of them are just so ass. A good clump of them are just big, slow, clunky weapons that you can only swing once before your entire stamina bar is cooked. The only one I kinda liked was the Sword of Searching. You know, the big fire sword the old hero uses, except when you use it, it's not even on fire, even though this game literally has a fire effect, so they did this for no reason at all. That's another thing with them. A lot of them do things I feel most people with common sense wouldn't have given them. Again, old hero's sword. Normal people would assume it's a flame weapon and that's its main draw. But no, it boosts item discovery. What about the Storm King's sword? He's a big manta ray that flies in the sky and shoots lightning down. Maybe it's just a really powerful lightning weapon or something like that. No, it boosts damage when your health is low. A mechanic literally nobody would have associated with this boss at all. Armored Spider? Honestly, I don't know what you'd assume with him. But I guarantee you wouldn't have said, oh, a bow that shoots fire arrows. Also notice, they could make a bow do fire damage, but not the giant flame sword. They're boring. The boss weapons here are boring. The most boring they've ever made, and I wouldn't blame you for not using them. When some of the most exotic weapons you can get in the game are kinda sleepers, I'm sure you could guess the rest of the stuff doesn't fare much better. The quirkiest build you can make is a low health red tear stone kind of build, with the Marion blade, and a ring that boosts your damage by about 50% or so. Which is fine, I guess, but I wish there was more than just that. There's a few big points to tackle here. Leveling your character by itself is pretty standard in this game. I don't think there's that much to say about that. It's when it comes to leveling items that I question how they ended up with the choices that they made. Your weapons level up to plus 10 with a few different resources. Think of Titanite shards, chunks, and stuff like that for you later FromSoft players. In this game, I shit you not, you can get the materials to make a +10 weapon by the second damn area. No joke, no lie. If you go to the smithing ground second, which I assume most people would, you can walk out of that region with a +10 maxed out weapon. What are the ramifications for this, you might be asking? You can pretty much annihilate every enemy and boss in the game. On a technical level, they were already pretty weak, but then you throw in the fact they're shitting ass loads of damage out and they all feel like throwaway fodder. On my first playthrough, I maxed out my sword and thought nothing of it. Then aside from getting lost in amazing areas like the Prison of Hope, I was bulldozing the game. Literally nothing could stand up to me in the random sword I found. As an RPG in general, it's flat out crazy they have a way to achieve this that early. And I know some may try to clap back by saying you could max out your weapons early in the other games if you knew what to do, but I did this by accident. If you wanted to max out a weapon mad early in the other games, at the very least you'd have to know what you were doing. Here I just waddled into the lizard room a few times and walked out being able to shred literally everybody. I don't know what the average weapon level is even meant to be for most of these bosses, because basically every normal leveling material drops here. The other locations mainly drop infusions like magic, bleed, or poison upgrade materials. So am I meant to pull a +10 weapon and flatten the rest of the game? Or was this just an oversight? I legitimately have no idea. Also, with normal leveling materials being so simple to come across, it kind of shafts a lot of the other interesting weapons because they'll be so weak by comparison. The penetrating sword, for instance, was a weapon I really wanted to use, but to level it you need colorless demon souls, which is a whole nother can of worms, to be honest. So instead I just used my basic straight sword for 90% of the game. It sucks. It's something they smoothed out with the later games like Dark Souls 2 or 3 with the shot mechanic, but it was really rough here for the most part. I don't think I have much else to add about this, but it really trivializes a ton of the game. This might sound weird, but if you've played this game, I'm pretty sure you know where I'm headed. Here, you didn't have Estus or an Estus equivalent. You had multiple kinds of grass. These basically were just items you could pick up at any time that could heal you, and make this game even more trivial than I already think it was. And you like Dark Souls 2, don't you? You fucking prick. The hypocrisy is wild on this one. Life gems and the grass in this game might seem similar, but I promise you they aren't. Life gems might get their own standalone video one day, but in short, in base game, they make it a lot easier to recover from engagements, and you'll most likely be fine. It doesn't completely eliminate the chances of you dying if you play bad, but it does lead to a more casual experience. But once you go higher in difficulties like New Game, or just simply joining the Covenant of Champions, they become less and less effective. You'll be pushed to use Estus more for its instant healing effect due to how much damage the enemies can do. And most of the time, you won't have the ability to wait for your health to slowly recover with a life gem. They're a good beginner tool, but the more you play the game, the weaker they become. Also, an important distinction is you'd have to go out of your way to buy 99 life gems. That game doesn't spoon feed them to you. Grass in Demon Souls doesn't have any of those properties. You're handed the highest upgrades of it constantly throughout enemies. It gets so ridiculous, you'll barely run out of them past the halfway point. They pretty much fully recover your health at any time. It makes it so unless you get one shot, you're probably not dying from anything. It makes it so you either feel nothing about an encounter, or you get violently angry that something randomly killed you in one hit, with no in-between.
This is a little addition, but having limited healing resources really messes with your ability to play around with builds and stuff. Estus, since you always had to set them out whenever you reset, let you toy around with certain things. This limited grass system means you're always losing something if you decide to do that.
This is by far the worst healing system they ever made, and I'm glad they got away from this kind of healing and landed on Estus being the main recovery resource. Have they made other mechanics that can circumvent healing with Estus? Yes. Has it ever been made this easy and free to recover again? No. And I feel that's a big flaw with this game. Now that we've got the core stuff covered, I can move into some small little odd stuff like this before we wrap up. World tendency affects how your world works. The lighter it gets, the more NPCs you'll see on your travels. The darker it gets, the more enemies will spawn. This in itself isn't bad. My problem is how you achieve both of these world states. To get pure white, you simply need to defeat every boss without dying in your human form. For you guys coming from other Souls games, it's like dying with a humanity or being embered. To gain Dark World tendency, you have to die in your human form. Why would you make it so if I put myself in the form with more health, likely because I'm stuck on something, if I die again, the game gets harder? From what I've played of pure Black tendency, the enemy spawn and damage can be brutal. Luckily for me, I only ended up in this state once intentionally. But what if you happen to be bad at the game and accidentally made it 3 times harder? I'd probably lose my mind. Pure white isn't as offensive in my opinion, but it's just really annoying. Having to beat every boss without dying in human form to make an area pure white is just dumb to me. One death in human form, and if you're offline, you've now locked yourself out of pure white world tendency, to my knowledge. I think I get the intentions behind it, but they just didn't really work out. For those of you who played OG Demon Souls, you probably don't know what this is. Fractured mode is a mode in which the world is flipped. That's mainly it. Everything that was on the right is now on the left. Now when you set something up as a mode, I'm expecting something new and interesting. Fractured mode doesn't add anything much aside from flipping the screen, and considering this is a new addition they made with the remake and they could have done anything with it, I think it's kinda lazy. But you may have noticed, I said mostly nothing else. There's one collectible that isn't in the base game. Ceramic coins. These are the worst things ever that you'll never find without a guide. Ceramic coins are these tiny little coins sitting in random boxes you have to roll through in the world. They have literally no indicator at all, nor any way for you to know what to do with them, even if you do randomly stumble upon them somehow. Ignoring how irritating it is to get them in the first place, the way you're meant to use them is you have to collect 24 coins across 2 playthroughs and bring them all to not Pickle Pea here. Then you'll get the Penetrator armor set, an outfit that wasn't even in the original game. The set looks amazing, but the steps to get it are so painfully obtuse, most won't figure how to get it or want to put themselves through the pain of finding it all. Because guess what? There's another small catch. These coins only spawn in pure white and pure black world tendency, meaning you'll have to deal with that fun little system I described before for all 12 coins in one playthrough. Then a second time for the other 12. Usually I put myself through these more difficult processes to show off the items like fighting a mon in Lost Paradise or having all nightmare clears at Zombie Army. But here, I couldn't be bothered. I tried to start looking for them, but the process is so torturous I gave up about 1/3 of the way through. Super subjective take, but hopefully you've seen my other Souls reviews, so you know it's a part I kinda like. The drip here in this game to me is the weakest out of the series. Many sets here just don't look great or memorable. In the best case scenario, 90% of the time, you're going to look like a throwaway Oblivion NPC. Considering how I generally like the monster designs, I thought the armor designs would catch my eye, but nah, not really. This game's OST is forgettable for the most part. Aside from the Maneater's theme, which unironically bangs for no reason, everyone else just kinda has music that exists. I can't tell you a single other time this game did anything else of note with its OST. This isn't some world-ending gripe or anything, but as someone who came from the later games that gave us tracks like Gwyn's theme, Alon's theme, and a majority of the Dark Souls 3 tracks, I was interested to see what they do here, and the answer is not much.
These are the segments I alluded to at the start that were recorded a while later. Regardless, this point is something small and I'm not gonna act like it's huge or anything, but after the introductory fight of the game, most, me included, assume that you were just kinda plopped in to fend for yourself. But if you turn around in the main hub, you'll see a bajillion notes scattered across the ground, info dumping pretty much every single mechanic of the game onto you. It's weird, and probably the weirdest tutorial in any game From's made. It's clear they learned from this, because every game in this style afterwards doesn't have this kind of scramble, but I think it's interesting. Animations here are fine for the most part, but the only reason I'm making a small section out of this is because of the backstab and parry animations. They are without a doubt some of the best parts of this game, and I feel horrible that I almost forgot to mention them. They're punchy, they're weighty, and oh so satisfying to land. I know some people have their gripes with the remake, but this I feel we can all universally agree was a plus. The storage and weight system here is odd. Here, your inventory has weight to it. Once you reach a certain amount of weight, you can't pick up anything else and you'll have to send it to storage. It's an awkward, clunky, and completely unneeded system. It can cause some issues. The fight with the Storm Ruler is a perfect prime example. When you run to go get the sword, if you don't have enough space, you have to awkwardly fiddle around with your inventory while getting pelted by the boss and his manta rays until you can pick it up. The final boss is another example. After you defeat him, you see his sword. When you go to triumphantly lift it, you can be met with a goofy pop-up saying it's too heavy for you, kinda killing the energy in the literal final moments of the game. These are some of the bigger examples, but this can happen at pretty much any time with anything. It's a system I'm very happy never came back. Demon
Demon Souls is FromSoft's first Souls game, and it's very obvious. It has everything you like about the other games, just it's a significantly weaker and worse version of all those aspects. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's nice that they've grown from their mistakes made here, but it's hard to find a ton of enjoyment if you played any of their other works. Would I recommend you play it? Probably not, no. The only person I can imagine getting a kick out of it nowadays is someone who's played all the other games and wants to see what FromSoft was cooking before in the old days. Otherwise, everything this game does, I'd say every other game does better. And I'd recommend you'd play any of those instead of this nowadays. Usually these conclusion sections would be a little longer, but I've already blabbed long enough, and my thoughts really end with what I just told you. So, with all that out of the way, what do you guys think? As always, as long as you're respectful, I'm glad to discuss with you in the comments, and I've been M, and I am out.